Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salli Allahumma sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Shafiul Amin. I'm a doctor working in general practice and a volunteer at the East London Mosque. And I wanted to present to you some advice on how we can best protect ourselves and our families during this current coronavirus pandemic. I'm sure many of you have been following the news and watching and reading many articles about the coronavirus, and are very well aware of some of the basic information about the virus. So, inshallah, I'm going to go through some very brief introductory points. The coronavirus is actually a family of viruses which cause the common cold, can cause mild colds during the winter months. And some of these coronaviruses are much more serious than others. So we know of the SARS virus, which caused an outbreak a couple of years ago. That's also part of the coronavirus family. And this current COVID-19 new strain of the coronavirus that we're dealing with is quite unique in certain respects. It's very infective. So what that means is it's able to pass from a person to another person with great ease. And also there's something called asymptomatic transmission when it passes from a person to another person. What we mean by that is a person could be completely symptom-free. They don't have a cough or a fever or anything like that, but they unknowingly are actually infected by the virus and are producing the virus and causing others to be infected and passing it on to others. In the most severe cases of the coronavirus, what happens is there's a severe reaction in the lungs, causing a lot of difficulty in breathing and taking in oxygen. And most of these individuals end up in intensive care and being admitted at the hospital. And hence, due to this severe reaction, many people pass away. And we're getting relatively high mortality rate because of that. Now, how is this virus transmitted? So what you've got to imagine, so this can seem like a very complicated diagram, but essentially this is the virus. When a person is exposed to the virus, especially the cells inside their nose, on their eyes, inside the mouth, and inside their respiratory tract, the virus goes and invades the cell by latching onto some of the receptors there, and then causes the cell to become a factory for the virus. So the cell starts producing a lot of the coronavirus and then ejects all of the new coronaviruses, and this cell dies. So then the new viruses, what they do is they start infecting more new cells, and you can see, so there are many more cells that then produce a lot of the virus. And these viruses live mostly in the nasal tract, inside the mouth, in saliva and mucus droplets. So when someone, for example, is exposed to the virus and then they start producing this virus, initially they don't have any symptoms. So if an individual who is infected and producing the virus rubs their nose or their eyes or their mouth and then goes off shopping or outside, touches a particular surface, and then another person comes and touches the same surface and then rubs their nose or their eyes or their mouth, then they become infected too. So you can see that it's so easy for the virus to be transmitted, and all the while the person who's transmitting the virus and the one who has become infected, they have no knowledge of the fact that they're harboring the virus. And then after a couple of days, when they start developing symptoms, they become much more infectious because now they are producing a lot of the virus. So coughing, sneezing causes the virus to be transmitted through some droplets from the nose, which hang in the air or stay in the air within 2 meters of the person who's coughing and sneezing before falling down onto a surface. And again, our knowledge of how this virus works is still quite basic. There's still a lot of research being done, and this is the current information that we currently have based on our knowledge of the other coronaviruses. So that's why the social distancing advice is to stay 2 meters apart, to make sure that if someone is coughing even if they're asymptomatic, the virus, which is transmitted through the droplet, hopefully won't go beyond 2 meters and go and then settle on the surface, and therefore not infect those people who are around. So hence, physical contact and being in close proximity with someone who's infected is really the main way that this virus is transmitted. Again, the virus can stay on a surface for several days, but this all depends on what type of surface it is, the temperature, the humidity of the room that the surface is in. So it's important for us to be wary of physical contact, being in close proximity when going outside, and also touching surfaces, because the virus can stay there for a long time. So what are the symptoms of the coronavirus if someone becomes infected? So the key symptoms that most people get is a very high temperature. And how do you determine that? Not everyone has the luxury of having a temperature probe at home. If you touch your chest or your back, and your chest or your back feels really hot to touch, then most likely you have developed a fever. If you start getting a new cough that continues, so you get a new continuous cough, that is also another symptom of the coronavirus. So this cough will continue through the day and the days to come. Many people have also reported to getting a loss of sense of smell as a sort of, and there's been quite a lot of data to suggest that this is quite a prevalent symptom. And because your body is fighting a virus and an infection, you start to feel very tired, and you can also feel quite dehydrated. There's some other symptoms which are not as common. So you can get sore throat, headache, aches all over the body. You can even get diarrhea and a runny nose. So if you do get symptoms, what you should do is you should go to the 111 NHS website, so 111.nhs.uk/COVID-19, and you can see here that they've got this online tool, and you should fill that in, and then they will go through your symptoms and when your symptoms started and what kind of things that you should be doing. And it's got the system has a way of picking up people who are very unwell and might need to see a doctor or even call 999, or those who can just stay at home and self-isolate. So it's very important, as soon as you or any family member get these symptoms, to go onto this website and fill in the online form, and it will give you important instructions at what you need as to what you should be doing next. For those of you who work, again, it's important to let your employers know, and you don't need to call your GP to get a sick note. What you should be doing is going on 111.nhs.uk/isolation note. And if you go onto that website, again, there's an online tool. You can fill in your details, and then it will give you a note. It will produce a note that you can show your employers, so that you can get paid for work, and you can show them that you're isolating for 7 days or 14 days because someone at home has got the symptoms. And it's also useful for you to sign up to the text messaging service. So if you do get the symptoms, then the NHS will start giving you text messages daily to offer you advice, to provide links to trusted sources of information. I mean, there's lots of misinformation going around, so it's important that we access our information from reliable sources. And also they will ask you how you are feeling and follow you up. So if you fill that in, again, the website I'll put up here, you can pause the video and just note it down. So when you're unwell, it's important to drink plenty of water, because your body is really quite run down fighting the virus, and making sure that you're well hydrated is extremely important. You can take paracetamol, ibuprofen as well to help with the pain and the fever. And you should be drinking, the best way of you knowing whether how well hydrated you are or not is if you, when you go to the toilet, your urine should be almost colorless. And that means that you're drinking enough water. But if it's very dark, it means that you need to drink more water. So if you're the person who has the symptoms, it's important to isolate for 7 days. So you stay at home for 7 days, and that prevents you from passing on the infection to others. And those living with you should self-isolate for 14 days. The rationale behind the 14 days is it could take up to 7 days for them to start displaying symptoms. And then once they start getting symptoms, then then of course another 7 days of isolation. So if they're self-isolating for 14 days, and then they leave the house, and the chance of them infecting someone else is very slim. So now this slide is really important for you to take note of. There are some people who, the elderly, our parents, uncles and aunts, or those with underlying medical conditions, at day 7 to day 10, they can start getting really, really unwell and might need to be seen by a doctor and assessed at the hospital. So some of the things that that show that a person with the coronavirus is now starting to get really unwell is breathlessness. And it's not just getting breathless. Many people can get breathless whilst they cough, but if you compare to the days before, for example, from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 to day 4, throughout the period with which you have been experiencing the symptoms, your breathlessness is actually getting worse, and you're working harder to breathe. If you're experiencing that, then it's important that you call 111 and get further advice. If you're getting breathless to the degree that now you're not able to complete normal activities as compared to the previous days, then again, this is a sign that now now your gut is starting to get quite unwell with the coronavirus. You start feeling dizzy, unable to take fluids, or not passing urine regularly. Again, that's a sign that your body is really struggling to fight the virus. If any of these apply to you, so it's important you call 111 straight away, and they'll assess you and advise as to what you can do, and give you further instructions if you do need to go into the hospital to be assessed at the emergency department. So this is really important that we understand. So the key highlight here is an increasing breathlessness and an increasing inability to complete your normal activities due to the breathlessness. Being breathless and being stable with that. So if you're slightly breathless and you are and you have no and it's not getting worse, then that's not particularly worrying. But still, again, if you're feeling unwell with your breathlessness, it's always better to get checked out and call 111 and get some advice. Now, if you've recovered from the virus, there are a few more things to just take note of. Now, a cough, the dry cough, can actually take up to 3 weeks for it to go away. It doesn't mean that you're getting your virus your infection is actually getting worse. Your body's essentially now recovering from the virus, and the cough can still linger on as the throat and the lung recovers from the recent viral infection. You can continue to feel quite tired because your body is still recovering from the virus. Now, some of the things, however, if you were to experience, it would be a good idea to get some medical attention. If you start getting really breathless again, if you start getting really bad fevers, and you start getting a new cough with lots of phlegm, any chest pain, feeling dizzy, or feeling increasingly unwell, then after you've recovered from the coronavirus, if you do get any of these, then it's important to speak to your GP, call 111, or even go to the hospital if you're feeling really unwell. So those are a couple of things. So just because you've recovered from the virus, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get unwell again. So it's important to be wary of that. Now, there are some people who are extremely vulnerable to getting the virus, and if they do get the virus, they might be extremely at high risk of getting a severe reaction to the virus. So I've just noted some of these down. These, if you go onto the NHS website, they have a long list of all of those things. So if that applies to you or a family member, you would have received a letter from the NHS, and the NHS advised that you stay at home, you shield, you isolate at home until June, which is quite a long time. But due to the risk, it's important that you take that advice seriously. And if you or a family member do fall into that particular category, go onto the gov.uk website, and you can register for help. So because you're staying at home most of the time, then they can help with shopping other there are other essential supplies and things that the government can help you with. So please do make sure that you do that if you fall into that category. There are others who are not as high risk, but then are still quite vulnerable. If they do get the infection, they are at increased risk of getting quite a severe reaction. So I've just listed that on this slide. You can pause the video and have a note them down and have a think as to whether you apply to that category, or if there's a family friend applying to that category or not. With these individuals, again, the advice is to try and stay at home as much as you can, work from home, only leave your house if you have to, wash your hands regularly, avoid anyone from outside coming into the house, and etc. And all of the advice, so protective advice is available in the NHS website. And also, with those who are at the extremely vulnerable group, it's important. Even many of us, we could live with our parents who fall into this group. For those who live with the high risk individual, it's also important that you follow very strict social distancing advice, and washing your hands regularly, wiping surfaces. Try and see if they can use, if you've got two bathrooms in the house, for them to have access to one bathroom and everyone else to use the other one, to wash kitchen plates and cups and glasses regularly, and cleaning the toilet with disinfectant as well. Now, with regards to children and the coronavirus, so far the evidence has shown that children are quite resilient to the virus, and they can get the virus, but it's been shown that most children generally do not get a severe reaction to the virus. But everything that I've mentioned before applies to children as well. So if they're unwell, then they should self-isolate. You should call 111. Those who are living in the house should also stay at home for 14 days. And if they start to get really unwell, if they are not taking fluids, if they're off their feeds, they're not passing urine, they're getting drowsy, and they just don't look well, and then it's important to get some medical advice. Because of the coronavirus, many people are now afraid to go into the hospital in case they get the virus, and that's actually led to a lot of people presenting extremely late to emergency departments and also the GP with really serious non-COVID related medical illnesses. So it's important for us to know that if you're experiencing symptoms of a heart attack or a stroke or any other, if you're unwell in any other way whatsoever, then it's important to call your GP or go to A&E if you're really unwell. All of the hospitals, as you can imagine, they're pretty empty at the moment, and they've got areas for coronavirus patients and those who don't have any coronavirus symptoms. So there's and of course the hospitals are being deep cleaned as well. So if you do need to access health services, make sure you do. What we don't want is for you to suffer silently at home and then present really late with really severe illness, such that there's getting the right treatment becomes quite difficult at that stage of your illness. So it's important that if you do feel unwell, do access your GP or 111 or do go to A&E if you do have an medical emergency. So some of the things that we can do to prevent the spread of the infection. Many of you are very well informed of these things, but just to reiterate: social distancing, work from home as much as you can. When you're outside, make sure there's more than 2 meters between you and the next person. Wash your hands with soap regularly, especially when you're coming in and out of the house or after you've touched your face. Make sure you wash your hand with soap. And soap is really good because what it does, it essentially destroys the biochemistry of the virus, and it renders the virus completely ineffective. It's also important to keep our phones, keys, surfaces clean with alcohol solutions, minimum 60%. and do not touch your face when outside, as per some of the slides that where we discussed how the virus is transmitted. It's also, as I mentioned before, it's also very important to be very careful with the extremely vulnerable group. So if you are living with them, to be very careful about keeping the bathroom clean, keeping all the surfaces at home clean, making sure everyone's washing their hands, and trying to keep a distance of at least 2 meters. Regarding masks, there's quite a lot of discussion about masks currently. It is, everyone agrees that if the person who's coughing, who's got the symptoms, wears a mask, then it does help in reducing the spread of the virus to others in the house. But just wearing masks without social distancing, washing your hands, and keeping surfaces clean wouldn't protect us from the virus. So don't overly rely on masks without making sure that you look into all of the other measures that you can take. And it's important to keep a healthy immune system. So sleeping well, making sure you get a good amount of sleep, good quality sleep. Exercising is also very good for your immune system. Going out, you can go out for a walk during the day for about half an hour, such that you're slightly out of breath. Or you can, there are many exercise regimes you can try and follow at home. YouTube has many resources in that regard. And keeping, having good balanced diet, breaking your iftar with good, with fruits and with complex carbohydrates, a bit of protein as well, meat, chicken or fish, and making sure that you're having a good amount of vitamin and minerals in your diet as well. And you can go on the NHS website to have a look at some of the sort of foods that you need to make sure that you're having, especially in Ramadan. And I just want to reiterate that following social distancing advice is so important, especially if you're young, you don't fall into the risk category, and you might think that, if I do get the virus, it's just be a cough for a couple of days and then I'll get better. But then if you do, we must be mindful of the fact that we might be a cause for spreading the virus to someone who is living with an elderly person, therefore they may end up having to lose their loved one because of careless behavior from my end. And it should weigh on our moral conscience to really strictly follow the social distancing advice, inshallah. And it's something that we've got to do as an entire community. So if everyone sticks to the advice, then we will see the benefits, inshallah ta'ala. It's also important to make sure that we look after our mental and spiritual health during this time. Many of us are not out and about. Many elderly are stuck at home and shielding. So it's important for us to look out for each other, stay in touch with friends and family, look after each other. If someone is isolating, if a family is isolating one of your neighbors, then our deen tells us to look after our neighbors and those who need help. So we should offer to do the shopping for them, to try and see if they need anything else, whilst maintaining social distancing, of course. And we know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the believer, one of the amazing things about a true believer is that whenever a difficulty comes their way, they're patient. And actually, this patient turns that difficulty into something that's actually good for them. And in the akhirah, we'll get the rewards for that. And if we come across anything that's good and that's beneficial, then we are grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every single time we have a positive outlook. And that's very important to maintain a good spiritual and mental health. And Alhamdulillah, our deen has many ways in which has given us many tools by which we can process, loss, difficulty, losing loved ones and bereavement and things like that. And it's important for us to remind ourselves, and especially in Ramadan, to build our iman, to reflect on the Quran, to engage in salah, to engage in dua. These are the things that really give us strength, psychological, mental, spiritual strength to get through difficult times. But if you do find that you're struggling with your mental health, it's important that you speak to someone and you get help from your GP, or you access the mental health services. And mental health problems are as difficult and are as real as physical problems. So it's important that we educate ourselves in that regard, and also encourage and speak to, if we know of anyone who's going through a tough time mentally, it might be good to access mental health services. Regarding fasting, if you do have any chronic conditions, just make sure that you speak to your GP to plan your fasts. And if you're unwell with the coronavirus, then dehydration will impact your recovery and will actually make you much more unwell. So it's important when it comes to fasting that we consider this, and we speak to our local imam or a learned person who we know, and also try and speak to our GP if possible about fasting. In our deen, alhamdulillah, we have provisions to make sure that you that if you are unwell, then you can make up your fast later on. So inshallah, we should make most of that and still continue with our ibadah and adhkar, and benefit from Ramadan in other ways. So if you'd like to get some more information on the coronavirus, the NHS has quite a lot of detailed information. You can inshallah access it there. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our families safe, for us all to benefit from Ramadan and make most of Ramadan, and inshallah use this time where we are spending most of our time at home reflecting and doing our salah and our dua and our adhkar, and becoming spiritually much stronger people, inshallah ta'ala. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.